This video is part 1 for 5.1, Evidence for Evolution, the fossil record. In this video, we will be covering evolution and talking about the fossil record. So we'll start generally by asking the question, what is evolution? So evolution occurs when heritable characteristics of a species change. So we'll dissect that statement a little bit here by looking at some definitions. So the first one is evolution. So evolution we can define as the cumulative change in the heritable characteristics of a population. Now when we talk about heritable characteristics, these are changes that must be passed on genetically from one generation to the next. And when we talk about that cumulative change, these are small changes upon small changes over many generations. And these characteristics that we are talking about that get passed on are gene-controlled factors. So we're talking about small changes, basically in allele frequencies or new alleles showing up over time in a population. And so evolution basically occurs at a population level and does not occur in individuals. And in later videos, we'll get into talking about the mechanisms through which evolution occurs, which is natural selection. So kind of an example of how evolution may have happened, we can look at how the eye within mollusks may have evolved. So in mollusks, you can get very simple methods of light detection to very complex methods of light detection. So for example, in the limpet, which is this guy down here, there is a very small layer of photoreceptive cells. Now in a slightly more complex organisms, such as mollusks, you get this pigment cup where the surface area of the photoreceptive layer is increased by starting to create this fold. And then in an organism like the nautilus, shown here, you can get a slightly more complex eye where the surface layer is increased by creating this greater fold. And then you can limit or help focus the light coming in through this hole into this water-filled cavity. Now when you get into marine snails, the ability to focus this light becomes a bit greater by introducing this refractive lens. And in the octopus, where you have a more complex eye, this ability to control the amount of light and even focus it becomes greater. So an octopus has an iris which can control the amount of light coming in. It has that refractive lens, which can change shape, which can allow it to see objects close up and far away. As compared to a limpet, which just has this layer of photoreceptor cells, can most likely just distinguish between light and dark. So over the course of this unit, or over the course of the next series of videos and unit, we will look at various bits of evidence for evolution. So evidence for evolution takes on many different forms. There is plenty of evidence that contributes to the evidence that evolution has occurred, is occurring, continues to occur. So in this video, we will focus on the fossil record. In another video, we will look at homologous structures, so structures that are similar across different organisms. We will look at selective breeding or artificial breeding and how this is used as evidence for evolution. We will look at bacteria, how bacteria resistance happens and how this is also evidence for evolution, as well as using this technique of comparative DNA and even comparative amino acid sequences to look at similarities and differences between organisms and how this suggests how different organisms are related or how distantly they may be related. So getting into fossils and the fossil record, so just starting simply with fossils. So fossils are going to be the petrified remains or traces of animals and plants that lived a long time ago. Now, they are often formed from the hard parts of organisms, such as shell, bone, or wood. And they form because minerals will seep into these tissues and will become hardened over time. And then as that living tissue decays, the minerals will form a replica that remains behind. Now, soft tissues can sometimes be preserved in the same way along with footprints and animal droppings, but more often than not, it is these hard parts of these organisms that get left behind. So fossil evidence may be one of two types. So there may be direct fossil, which are body fossils such as bones, teeth, shells, and leaves, and other things. And then there are the indirect or trace fossils, such as footprints, tooth marks, tracks, or burrows. So evidence that animals would have left behind. So in terms of types of body fossils, these can be categorized as a compression fossil, cast and mold, or in the form of petrified wood. So with a compression body fossil, this is where sediment layers have piled on top, compressing the specimen, making a flat layer. With casts and molds, this is where the organic material has decayed, and that depression fills in the shape of the organism. So this is where the minerals have filled in those parts and get remained or get left behind. For plant materials, it's often in the form of petrified wood, where minerals replace that organic material. Another type of fossil is in the form of amber. So amber is basically preserved or hardened tree resin, and it can preserve organic material. And often with that petrified tree resin, insects and plant material are most often captured within it. And amber is useful in that you will find preserved organic material within it. Other fossils don't preserve those organic materials. Now, if you've ever seen Jurassic Park, you will recall it is these amber specimens that have these mosquitoes in it, which was used to retrieve the dinosaur DNA, which was ultimately used to clone the dinosaurs for Jurassic Park. So in this process of fossilization, how it occurs is that you have layers of sediment, as layers of sedimentary rock are put down, the inorganic components of the plants and animals and prokaryotes are preserved. And basically the way it works is the deeper they are in the sediment layer, the older they are. And so you have your dead organism, and as it's just laying there on the bottom of this lake or riverbed, sedimentary layers are going to be put down over on top of it, and then it will be compressed, and over time, as that organic material decays, it should leave an impression behind of those hard portions of that organism, and then over time, that fossil can be exposed or it can be excavated. Now, there are very specific conditions that favor fossilization, which include rapid burial. So you need a sedimentary layer to be put down very quickly over that dead organism. And it has to have possession of hard parts as well that have to be preserved. So an example are sharks, where the skeleton of a shark is cartilage. And so for ancient sharks that are found, it's only the teeth, which are the only hard parts of that animal, that get left behind. So the only evidence for prehistoric sharks come in the form of those fossilized teeth. So fossilization as a result is an extremely rare chance event. Predators, scavengers, and bacterial action normally break down dead plant and animal structures before they can be fossilized. So more often than not, an organism is going to be fully decomposed before it can be fossilized. So most fossils remain buried, or if they become exposed, or are overlooked or accidentally destroyed. So, are the chances of a fossil forming is rare, and then the chances of finding that fossil, are even rarer as a result. So even though we found many, many fossils, it doesn't begin to even indicate the extent of number of organisms that may have existed. So what the fossil record is used for is that it does provide evidence for evolution. It does suggest the sequence in which groups of species evolved as simple organisms appear in the fossil record first. They appear at the lowest stratus, so at the lowest levels. And basically, the strata are just different levels or different time periods. So, for example, we have the Triassic time period, the Jurassic time period, in which, we had all these different species of dinosaurs that existed. And then the sum, so what the fossil record is used for is that the sum of all the discovered and undiscovered fossils and their relative placement in rock is basically what the fossil record is going to be. Now, as I mentioned, there are gaps in the fossil record, and this is due to the requirements of fossilization to occur, the fact that only hard parts of organisms remain, and fossils can be damaged before they are discovered, leaving only fragments of those fossils behind. So the fossil record can be used as evidence for evolution, as fossils can be dated by determining the age of the rock layer in which the fossil is found. Sedimentary rock layers develop in a chronological order, such that the lower layers are older and the newer layers form on top. Each strata represents a variable length of time that is classified according to a geological timescale, so eons, eras, periods, those types of things. Different kinds of organisms are found in rocks of particular ages in a consistent order, indicating a sequence of development. So in the fossil records, prokaryotes appear before eukaryotes, ferns appear before flowering plants, and invertebrates appear before vertebrates. In determining a fossil's age, there's a couple ways in which this can be done. So the first method is determining that fossil's age by relative dating. And this is basically done by placing rocks and events in that chronological order based on those strata levels. Now, determining a fossil's age by relative dating is based on this principle of superposition, given that younger sedimentary rocks are deposited on top of older sedimentary rocks. So basically, the layer of rock that you find the fossil in gives an idea of the relative date of the fossil. So the relative date of a fossil is useful, but fossils provide reliable historical data only if we can determine their absolute age. And so to determine the absolute age, a number of methods are used to date fossils. So here are these dating methods that use a variety of chemical and physical techniques. So oftentimes they look at the ratios of isotopes that are present in a fossil. So for example, the level of carbon-14 that is present in a fossil can indicate its age range, for example. So the fossil record can also show changes in characteristics of organisms over time. So in this example here, using the horse, the fossil sequence here shows that over time, horses have developed single-toed hooves. There are fossils that show that the ancestors of horses had had multiple toes, and over time, horses have developed longer legs, longer faces with larger teeth for grazing. So fossils can also show a chronological sequence in which characteristics appear and develop in complexity. Another type of fossil that can be found are what are called transitional fossils. So transitional fossils show the links between groups or species by exhibiting traits common to both the ancestral group or species and its derived descendant group or species. So the classic example of a transitional fossil is that of Archaeopteryx. And Archaeopteryx provides evidence for the evolution of birds from dinosaurs. So Archaeopteryx had features common to both birds and dinosaurs. So it had feathers and had reptile-like features such as a long tail and teeth. But Archaeopteryx likely did not fly. So collectively now, these fossil discoveries can document the formation of new species and the origins of major groups as well, as evidence for evolution. So if we kind of look at this time scale here and we look at when fossils were discovered, so if this is present day here and each of these numbers represents millions of years before today, at around 200 million years in the fossil record is when we find the earliest mammals starting to appear. 300 million years ago are when the earliest reptiles appear. 500 million years ago are when the earliest fish appeared, and 600 million years ago are when the earliest invertebrates with shells appeared. So this is the end of the video for part 1 of 5.1, looking at the fossil record.